It is actually indeed a remix of Brian Eno. You're very correct in your assumption there. It's actually called Vats of Goo, the final track. It's from the original soundtrack to Fallout 1. It's when you're in the Mariposa military base and they find the quote-unquote vats of goo full of the Force Evolution revivers. So yeah, you are indeed correct in your little good spot there. To be honest, well done. I like using game music specifically when I'm on stream because I know that you definitely can't get copyrighted for it. Because otherwise, if you were playing the game, it would get copyrighted when you were trying to live stream it to Twitch or YouTube. And there's lots of agreements within games to make sure that they are available to be streamed and used for Let's Plays and things like that. So I know that I can be super, as long as I use specific game music, I'm safe to just use that as backing for parts of the stream without having to worry. So, well worth doing. I hope everyone's okay. Hope we're all doing well. There's plenty for us to cover this afternoon. It's been a big day for strikes. It's been a funny day for Allison Bailey and all of her sycophants, but we shall definitely get into these as the stream goes on. Also been kind of going a bit wild on TikTok at the moment, so I'm going to be talking about that as well, about the specific spat that I had. Well, not even a spat because she's not even responded, but there was someone playing silly buggers with the truth on TikTok. I had to set them right, and they've not responded to me, so I'm going to put out another video on YouTube rather than TikTok and see if I get a response on the bigger platform. Okay, let me just have a look. So, I don't know if anybody missed it, but the trains are on strike again. It's RMT, which means this segment's going to be full of plenty of juicy Mick Lynch coverage. Don't you worry, we'll definitely be getting the Chad Mick Lynch footage out for this particular segment. But since the last train strike has happened in June, did not yield sufficient settlements or negotiations from the train operators. They're going on strike again this week. Again, the reasons why it's not just pay, just to kind of head this one off, as in before the angry commenters on Future on YouTube go, I don't earn £62,000 like the train drivers do. These are just greedy people. Well, not the train drivers specifically that are on strike. It's mostly support workers on people as low as £18,000 per year. So all of you people in the YouTube comments, you can shut the fuck up. But it's mostly to do with changing conditions, changes to work-life balance, change to your pension plans, loads of different stuff. And so they're going on strike again, as you would expect from a lefty channel. They have my full solidarity, and they absolutely should go on strike, and everyone else should go on strike. You should join a union and theoretically go on strike. So let's first of all, let us go to the man himself, just explaining what the background to the continuation of this dispute. Now, the Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, is going to come up a lot in this. Obviously, it's a transport strike, and he's a transport minister, so he should be involved in trying to make sure that the strike action doesn't happen, so that it's better for people who work on the trains and better for the people who do use them as well. But anyway, I will leave it to the man himself to detail the issues with regards to the train strikes. Let's go.
He's responsible for this dispute in the sense that he has a veto on what the train operating companies can offer us. It's written into their contracts that he's directly responsible for industrial relations, and he can dictate what the terms are. And the fact is they've made no offer on pay towards our members. What they've offered us is mass redundancies, recontracting our members on inferior terms and conditions, massive changes to their work-life balance, and cuts in Network Rail to the safety regime of up to 50% of the inspection. So he's caused this problem, and he's got to facilitate a way out of it, and he could do that today. And if he wants to facilitate a negotiated settlement, I'm very happy to deal with him. But what he won't do is contact me or any of my officers or any of the people responsible for this negotiation and create a way forward. He's responsible for this dispute.
Now, and Mick Lynch is absolutely correct. He has the power to be able to make sure that these strikes don't happen. And the issue is that from what I will be getting onto from moving forward, there is this move from the Conservative Party, from the new Conservative candidates, from people within the cabinet. Loads of different people have come out in favour of more kind of draconian laws around strike action. So you've got to understand that they don't want an end to the dispute. The Tories do not want the dispute to be settled. They don't want to give them the good pay rise. First of all, because it means essentially the unions have won. That means that could lead to further strike action down the road, which would impact their donors' pocketbooks, right? But second of all, they want to use it as an excuse to try and create a narrative about people who belong to the unions, making it, holding the country to ransom, so to speak, and then using that as an excuse to push through the theoretical draconian anti-union legislation. But anyway, Grant Shapps did respond. He was spoken to by Nick Ferrari on LBC. Let's have a listen.
Look, I think passengers know when they're being taken for a ride, and
Literally.
I've unfortunately not enough, because the railways are striking. And I was having a look back this year alone. The unions have lodged 60 disputes in the 3 years I've been Transport Secretary. 160 disputes. There's not been a single day where there hasn't either been strike action or the threat of strike action outstanding in the 3 years since I've been Transport Secretary.
It's almost like no one's had a pay rise in 3 years, and they're also trying to tear up the rules about what they can and can't do with regards to hire and rehire and things like that. The operators, that is. And it's funny how this was the guy who said that P&O ferries essentially doing huge mass redundancies so they could hire agency workers on cheaper contracts who weren't trained properly. He was like, "Oh, this is a scandal. This is outrageous. We're gonna go down to we're gonna go down to Dover and stand near the picket lines from the RMT and saying, "Oh, this is how bad." Literally, Natty Elphick was on the front lines of the demonstration against P&O ferries. And Grant Shapps was one of the people saying, "Oh, this is outrageous. They should be doing these things." But suddenly, when it comes to the RMT and it's against the train operators, oh God, we can't believe that the union barons are holding the country to ransom like this. Yet maybe if they'd have been given proper pay rises and proper remuneration, and people and members of the companies, of the operating companies who want to tear up the rule book on what is reasonable to expect of their workforce, maybe all of this strike action wouldn't be happening.
Something is wrong with the way we're running our railways, and what we've got are forever strikes and mandates which never run out, which means that there's a constant threat of industrial action, which means that actually already pretty well paid rail staff, the median salary, the average is 44 grand. We've got the train drivers on strike.
They're covered by ASLEF, not RMT. They're not on strike. The tube drivers on strike, they are covered by RMT. It is the support staff that are striking at the moment.
This coming weekend, their average is nearly £60,000. The government's got to make a choice about whether we pay our nurses more. By the way, their medium is 31.
And again, it's not just about pay either, right? Grant trying to frame this specifically around pay rather than actually talk about the real issues, which is changing to people's, as Mick Lynch was saying previously, changes to people's work-life balance, changes their pension provision, firing, rehiring on worse contracts with worse terms, and worse working conditions, right? And it's about pay, jobs, conditions, and pensions. So these are the main thing. So he's trying specifically, right? They try and specifically focus on the pay of the people who are striking so they can pit them against other working class people, right? It's the explicit line that you've seen. I was saying, well, you don't see nurses asking for a pay rise. Oh, well, I earn £25,000 a year. You don't see me striking when other people are on £40,000 a year. It's like, maybe, mate, maybe there's a link between your lack of industrial action and your low pay. I'm on, my basic salary is £21,000 a year before I get my additional bonuses or whatever. You don't see me complaining that the people who are striking on the rail network earn more than I do. No, they're absolutely entitled to their right to, and they should do, especially when their conditions are being torn up and are having their pensions kind of hacked into. I'm sorry, but this narrative they're trying to spin is just complete bullshit.
1,000 care workers or others. And we're not saying that railway workers can't have a strike. We're just saying in return, we need to modernise the working practices, which come from the dark ages. Many of them haven't been updated for years. And we're saying that's got to be done at the same time. That's where we're up.
Again, they won't tell us what the modernisation is. I mean, Mick Lynch was on Question Time, and he explained about how there's plenty of modernisation that's going on. What modernisation really is It's just a kind of a buzz phrase that they can use to try and paint union workers as being as kind of, as being dinosaurs who won't get with the times, rather than people who don't want to have their their working life kind of decimated by your profit-seeking rail operating companies. I'm sorry, unless you can really tell me what specifically is the modernizations that they're looking for, then you'd all this is just trying to manufacture the consent of people against those who are striking.
Up to on this, and I'm afraid it's a battle that we must this time win. We can't allow these union dinosaurs to keep holding us back.
I was speaking.
I literally said dinosaurs, and he was copied me verbatim there. What a surprise!
With Mr. Lynch about 10 minutes ago, Mick Lynch about 10 minutes ago, and obviously he pointed to the salaries that are enjoyed by some of the managers, the bonuses that are taken, and the money reaped by shareholders. I won't go through all the figures; you'll have heard them before. How do you respond, Mr. Shapps?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think those salaries have been too high in the past. The current CEO, although salaries
What about the shareholders, Grant? What about the shareholders and all the profits?
still very high, saw a reduction, I think I'm right in saying, of 28%, because we've been pushing down on these salaries. I've made sure that overall management salaries have come down, I think, by about 10%. Since I've been transport secretary. I agree, no one should be earning excessively, but the idea that we should continue to work on the 1950s and 60s sort of terms, for example, not being able to staff the weekend railway on many lines without the goodwill and volunteering of staff. If there's a football game, say there was a big football match on Saturday night.
Well, there
on
could be a
Sunday,
big one on Sunday afternoon, by the way, Secretary of State. There's a big one at Wembley, potentially.
Exactly, yeah. What happens is that when there is one on a Saturday, on a Sunday, you end up not being able to run services on some of our lines. And that can't be right in a modern railway. We've got to...
Can anyone point me to a time ever where they just had to cancel lines on a Sunday because they couldn't get staff? I'm sorry. Like, it's always been in this country that things are less populated on a Sunday. The rails run less frequently, the buses run less frequently, shops are open shorter. It's as simple as that.
To actually be able to plan to run the railway every day in the contract. I don't mean people have to work 7 days a week. In fact, many railway workers get to work, train drivers, for example, get to work a 4-day week. Very nice. All I want to see is an efficient railway where people can get on with the job. And as I said before, passengers not being taken for a ride.
And the problem is, but they won't actually go there and negotiate. That's the big issue. If he was actually out there properly trying to get a settlement, then we wouldn't be having this issue. But he's specifically trying to make sure that he stays arm's length away from the negotiations as possible, so that they don't come to a head, so that he can keep hamstringing the operators who probably do want a settlement. The operators just want to be able to collect their profits and go home, right? They do not want the rail network to be held up by strike action. They would probably want a settlement. But Grant Shapps is explicitly trying to hamstring what can and can't be done, what settlements can and can't be had, specifically so that the narrative that I mentioned before can be drawn. Now, funnily enough, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to play a clip of James O'Brien. And I can't believe he's on the right side of this issue. But he says here, the James O'Brien is outlining why the RMT strike action is about much more than just the railways. So it'll be interesting to see James O'Brien be correct about an issue for once.
Post-war, with the foundation of the welfare state, with the foundation of the National Health Service, with the foundation of a society in which people were protected and the rise of the trade union movement, everything got better. It never became perfect, but everything got better.
True. It's almost like life was much better for everybody in the social democratic consensus, where wealth was spread and distributed more evenly across society, than right now, when we've had 40 years of trickle-down economics. All of that money has been siphoned up by the super rich and the mega wealthy. As Mick Lynch has said many times now, we have more billionaires than we've ever had. Has any of that wealth trickled down? Has it? Fuck. Our wages haven't gone up at all or barely has in the last decade. So he's absolutely 100% correct here.
Because we recognised the dignity of the individual, and we recognised the rights of the humans in this country. The right to education, the right to healthcare, the right to protections at work against exploitative or even dangerous employers. You were protected at home, at work, at school, in hospitals, and it was a hard-fought battle. A hard-fought battle.
But you can even make this argument, not even from some kind of moralistic standpoint about, well, everyone should deserve the right to X, Y, Z, everyone should deserve that. Even from just a kind of like a purely like a economical basis, it makes for a better society regardless. At the moment, we're having such an issue where because there's so much of a private monopoly on things which are necessarily inelastic markets, things like energy, things like water, things like housing, all of these kind of things. They have the ability, once they have a class monopoly control of these particular industries or these particular utilities, they then have the ability to be able to essentially charge as much as they want for them, because you can't go without a house, you can't go without water, you can't go without energy. These are all things that you need to be able to survive. And so, as we've seen, this has led to, without as Ofgem have continued putting the price cap up because they don't really care about people, right? They don't really care about how these markets function as long as they as long as they appease the people who are regulatory captured. Ofgem itself, right, as who's supposed to be an impartial regulator, but seems to only ever regulate on behalf of the businesses, especially by removing their ability to be able to for people to be able to bargain with and use the competition that they do have between different providers and different retailers of energy. This is not a system that really functions well. It's much better when you have these things provided at a low rate by the state, because we all need them, right? This is the big kind of divider between people on low wages and people on high wages, because they all have that minimum that you have to be able to acquire, which is housing, energy, and water, all this kind of stuff. You have to be able to get over that minimum. Then anything above there is what people would call, expendable or dispendable income or whatever. But poor people don't have that, and that is slowly being eaten into over time, and the cost of living crisis has exemplified this. If there's ever a time when we would realise that having these things in public control so everyone has access to them is a much better society for everybody, is it gives more people the ability to participate in the market, right? And markets function better when you have people who are more equally able to consume, because more of their consumption is dictated by their own wants and their own needs that they want to be able to participate in, rather than things that they are forced to participate in because they're a natural monopoly with an inelastic demand curve. It's very simple.
But it's never won, you see. And this is, I think, when I retire, when I hang up my headphones, it will be when I stop being taken by surprise by things, when I stop having moments of realization, when I stop feeling my comprehension of big issues improve, when I stop thinking, crikey, I'm still in the foothills of understanding stuff. As soon as I smugly and almost certainly incorrectly start thinking I've got everything sussed, then I'm off. You know, the kind of person who never changes their opinion about anything. A 20, 30-year window. Every strike is wrong. Every unemployed person is a scumbag. Every single mother is undeserving of... So you did these, I mean, very much a passport to prominence in British media now, right-wing British newspapers. Think of a...
Now? You think that's only just started now, James? You're right, Darla, he is incredibly inconsistent, and we're seeing it right here. We're just saying, oh, well, the media now we're seeing it now. Well, the media has been fine up until now, where there's never really been a problem, whilst, again, as I've always kind of chided him for, the time when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the opposition, he refused to acknowledge the things that he's acknowledging now. He's saying, oh, how do we get into this mess? I'm like, well, you fucking caused the mess. Because you, along with everybody else who works in your organisation, the rest of the mass media, the mass media conglomerates who use their power as people who control the public discourse to create these narratives and to manufacture these narratives, where you can even see it, right? You see the graph of the amount to which people think that immigration is a problem is literally directly correlative with the amount to which the media talks about the problem of immigration, regardless of what the numbers are or any kind of theoretical issues that might arise from that. They're directly correlative because people are fed these narratives and fed these ideas from mass media organisations and have their consent manufactured. Like, the fact that he thinks that it's just started now, like, do you know if anyone remembers things like the benefit scrounger narratives all the way through kind of the Blair and Brown era, which led to the kind of essentially like the austerity program and the anti-disabled campaigns of the Department of Work and Pensions under the Cameron regime, right? All those people who died because of benefit sanctions. All those people who had all of their dignity stripped away from them have to go for work capability assessments, right? People being declared fit for work when they can barely walk, when they have cancer. That's all downwind of that media narrative against the quote unquote scroungers, right? So the media are incredibly good at manufacturing this narrative because their one driving ambition is always profit, right? That's what drives them, and anything that might compromise those profits, or anything that generates a certain clickbait narrative that they can gain additional readership for and additional money from doing so, they're going to do it.
The newspaper columns, climate change, industrial action, unemployment benefit, whatever it might, public sector, whatever it might be, there it is. Absolutely written in stone, and no desire to understand anything. I'll hang up my headphones when I stop being taken by surprise by stuff. And the biggest thing to take me by surprise in the last couple of years is that realization that no progress is permanent. No progress is permanent. And that's why I find Mick Lynch a uniquely fascinating character. One of his predecessors at the RMT, Bob Crow, was similarly engaging and compelling and indeed brilliant at arguing. But there's something about Mick Lynch which I think is even more impressive and important, and it's a sort of bedrock of intellectual sophistication. There is...
I mean, he tells it like it is. We've had so many years, right? We've had so many years of having MPs on the program, having people who want to have a media career in the future, right? Who want to see themselves as being somebody who the media can continue to invite on, and they can play nicey with Murdoch and the Barclay brothers and all those fuckers, right? We've had so many years of this, and people treading on eggshells, people having these incredibly rehearsed lines that they've got from their spin doctors at Laboratory HQ. It's all incredibly they're like simulacra, essentially. They're all just kind of alabaster statues repeating rehearsed talking points. They're completely there's no sincerity in what they're saying. Mick Lynch comes along and is just like, no, I don't really care about any media career. I just want to be able to have my terms and conditions for my members sorted out. They elected me as the General Secretary. I am doing the job they elected me to do. Now let me talk about the issues that I have, how we can come to a solution, and the facts of the matter, right? So it doesn't give any fucking bullshit. He tells no lies. It's 100% truth, right? He's not there to be a future LBC presenter like Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner or Matt Hancock seems to want to be with their little times being an LBC presenter. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. He just wants to come on, represent his members, and then go home. And that's that is a refreshing level of sincerity that basically hasn't been present in the media industry for about 30 years. For incredibly long time, we've never really got that level of straight talking sincerity out of someone who's been given media time, at least to this magnitude, like Mick Lynch has.
I think perhaps a more urgent threat to those victories, to those protections, to those rights, that is really coming into focus quite fast. Liz Truss essentially boasting about how hard she will work to strip you of your rights. And she is doing so with a fair degree of confidence that you will cheer her for doing it.
I mean, it's worth also mentioning that Liz Truss is somewhat appealing to the public, but also mostly appealing to the Conservative membership, right? Who obviously are all fucking rich cunts from Surrey. They don't give a shit. They couldn't care if union power went down, because they're all on fucking 100k and live in detached houses in the suburbs, right? They can give a shit. They honestly could not give two shits about what happened to the unions. And so any kind of war against the poor that might be fought, they're happy to stake their name to. That's who she's appealing to, because that's essentially who is going to elect her, right? Obviously, there's going to be an outward level where she wants to appeal to the public as well, so that if she does become leader, she can win a future election. But this hard line that's being taken, this I hate to use Starmer's phrase, but this Thatcher cosplay, but not even cosplay. Like, cosplay would imply that she's doing it, she's just pretending, when she's not. She's just fucking is trying to be Thatcher number 2. I said previously when we were covering the debate that it's her dream is to turn the UK into the sweatshop of Europe, to rip up every single rulebook of workers' rights and leave everything to the competition in the market, because she's a market fundamentalist at the end of the day. That's her plan. That's how her ideological goals, like she would get from that's what the Heritage Foundation want her to do. Britannia Unchained, etc., etc.
That's why Mick Lynch is so fascinating. That's why when Mick Lynch pops up on the telly with some blowhard thinking that they'll be able to knock him in around the studio in an interview, he ends up wiping the floor with them because he understands stuff and he is motivated, I think, by a genuine sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency for me has grown in the last week when I look at Sunak and Truss embarking upon this bizarre attempt to compete about who can describe the consequences of the last 12 years in the most negative terms. I mean, it is actually breathtaking. There's never been a leadership election like it. A Chancellor of Exchequer and the Foreign Secretary competing to decide who is going to be the harshest critic of the government they were in until a month ago. It's madness, right? And one of the areas in which they are competing is
Well, I said the main thing they compete. I mean, the Conservatives have been complaining for a very long time that the Tories haven't been Tory enough, but the membership is just incredibly far right at this point. They are very far right people, or hard right, I guess, probably a better term. There's not like a bunch of Nazis or whatever who are the Conservative membership, but they're all fucking, ideological like objectivists and libertarians, and they think that the state shouldn't be involved in anything, and they want every single state protection ripped up because they want to become the 1%. That's it. That's all it's about.
is this. Who's going to attack trades unions or workers most viciously?
And also, do you know what that is? Do you know what that is, James? That's class war. That's what that is. They're saying, oh, they're attacking trade unions, they're attacking workers. Yes, because they represent the bourgeoisie. Yeah, thank you for the subscription, Pre-Catty. Welcome to the Justice stream. That's the big issue, right? It is class war. The Tories represent the bourgeoisie. The memberships of the Tory party are predominantly members of the bourgeoisie. They get money or donations from the bourgeoisie. That is who they're meant to represent. The unions are the vanguard of the proletariat at this point, right? That's why they want to attack them, because they know that is who their class enemy is. Like, people keep saying, oh, well, after all this time, Marxism is kind of discredited. I'm like, this is now has never, ever been clearer to me. The prescriptions about capitalist society that Marx makes in Capital are abundantly clear to me now at this point. Abundantly clear.
Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. And Mick Lynch remains one of the only people who is manning the barricades. That's why this is such a fascinating week for me in British politics, and why this industrial action is about much more than railways.
And he's right. Like, he's absolutely right. Because we're seeing, like, I covered it when I was covering the leadership debate from the BBC the other day, when they were both asked if they would ban Sunak and Truss. Both asked if they would ban public sector strikes, or strikes for things that are like certain kinds of sectors of the economy that are seen as being essential, right? Things like the railways, things like nurses and stuff like that. And they said yes, they would just ban it straight up. That's horrifically draconian. And Liz Truss, as was described there by James O'Brien, proudly displaying that she needs to take tough and decisive action to limit trade unions' ability to paralyse our economy. Essentially trying to finish what Thatcher started, essentially. Like, that's the kind of shit that they're saying. Yeah, like, we can't allow union dinosaurs to hold us back was the quote from Grant Shapps. We're in dangerous times. This is a dangerous one. Not only she's going to start nuclear war, she's going to destroy workers' rights and try and turn us into somewhere where you have no fucking protections. She'll do everything in her power to make sure that militant action from trade unions can no longer cripple the vital services the hardworking people rely on. When was the last time you ever saw like huge amounts of strike action like we're seeing now? It's been ages. The idea that a couple of strikes, like we've got BT, Royal Mail, there was potential action from bin workers, from BA workers, all post-pandemic, right? This is not it's not like they've had like some kind of vice grip on the economy for the last 12 years. What we've seen is a huge amount of essentially a class consciousness come out of the result of the pandemic, how all of the money that was spent in the pandemic either got put into the pockets of conservative donors or all filtered up to the establishment, and then will never come back down because our economy is essentially rigged. And people have seen this in the wake of the pandemic and in the wake of the cost of living crisis that we're seeing now. And suddenly they've all started again. The idea that this has somehow been some endemic problem that needs resolving right away, when, none of us have fucking pay rises for a decade. Like, so many people in this economy have just been sitting on low wages whilst costs have gone up and up and up and up. Costs of rent have gone up, costs of energy have gone up, general cost of living has been going up, and we're now in a crisis time. Of course they're going on strike. People need to fucking live, and they have no other recourse other than trade union action, as Mick Lynch quite rightly said. If you can't bargain, you have to beg. We're not going to beg to be thrown scraps from the bourgeois. We're going to bargain, and if people don't want to secede to any of our requests, then we'll go on strike and we'll weaponize the best power that we have. Let's have a look at the Liz Truss's article here. Our pledge came before Tory leadership frontrunner endured a series of aggressive and hectoring attacks from Rishi Sunak in the debate. She wants to raise the minimum threshold support for strike action from 40% of eligible to 50%. Wants to double the notice period for industrial action to 4 weeks, as well as stop members receiving tax-free payments from their unions on strike days. We need tough and decisive actions, etc. Rishi Sunak indicated he would also take a tough line on unions if he became Prime Minister. Apparently, it was a 2019 manifesto commitment to require minimum service levels during transport strikes. As Prime Minister, I'll stop the unions holding working people to ransom. But it's not working people, they're holding the fucking bourgeois, the profit seekers. The train companies being held to ransom. Like, the people doing it are workers. What the fuck are you talking about? What else is it? End unions being able to strike as many times as they like in the 6 months after a ballot. Stop members from receiving tax-free payments and increase the so that's what we've just gone over there. But this is frighteningly draconian. And there was, I believe it was, which video am I looking for? Is it this one? Yeah, this was a TikTok that was released by the RMT union account that you should definitely go watch, of Mick Lynch responding to what Liz Truss said there.
We're going to have one of the most extreme leaders, if she succeeds, that we've ever had in the Prime Minister's office. This is a direct attack on one of the main pillars of our democracy. One of the founding bases of any democracy is the right for a trade union to freely organise and take appropriate industrial action. She's seeking to make effective industrial action illegal. So people will have to use other means to take action and respond to the employers. Who's being held to ransom at the moment is the British worker right across the economy. We saw the problems with the NHS yesterday, up to 60,000 vacancies in important jobs, because people are stressed out and underpaid and are not getting a square deal. What she wants is the trade unions to surrender so that we have a low-paid, cowed workforce in this country, which makes profit rampant and supports the people that support her, the 160,000 Tories that are going to vote for her in some kind of Surrey golf club scenario, will be very pleased with this rhetoric. But the rest of the country, if you believe in democracy and believe in a liberal economy, cannot support what she's standing for because it's oppression of working people.
He's 100% correct, right? That's what I said previously. It is class war. This is class war that is going on specifically to try and crush the ability of workers to be able to organise, right? To turn us into sweatshop workers. That's what's going to happen. That's what she would do if she got her own way. I really don't want to sugarcoat this, and quite frankly, this article here dictating that RMT boss would call for a general strike if she became Prime Minister and try to enact her membership. Abso-fucking-lutely. 100% general strike. How else are we supposed to do it? If we have, a tiny portion of the population deciding that she should become Prime Minister with very little mandate to be able to implement these incredibly wide-reaching reforms that would crush the ability of workers to be able to effectively organise, what else can we do other than a general strike? A handful of Conservative members dictating what we can and can't do with our working lives? Fuck off. But absolutely no. This is the only thing. We have to then take even more drastic action at this point, and call for a general strike. Mr. Lynch called for an enormous response from the Labour movement if Miss Truss's promise to crack down on trade unions comes into effect, and warned it would drive workers back to Victorian times. Well, yeah, it's fucking workhouses Mark II. Her policies would affect teachers, postal workers, and the energy sector. He was joined by Shadow Minister, Transport Minister Sam Tarry, who defied orders from the Labour leader Keir Starmer for opposition MPs to attend Wednesday strikes. Yeah, Sam Tarry's he's one of the Shadow Transport Secretaries. He's up for deselection in his in essentially like a in a coup essentially in the South Ilford seat he's been on, which is ex Mike Gape's seat, and they just hate him because he's an SCG member. Like just like Upsana Begum. They basically just got a kangaroo court going on to try and deselect anybody that is new to the left of fucking Pinochet at this point. So, and he defied the orders for people not to attend strikes because he's a fucking Labour MP. Labour MP are supposed to be the representatives of the unions in Parliament. So they should be given the opportunity to go on picket lines to show support for striking workers. I'm sorry, Keith, but that's just them's the breaks. I've got another video about that previously. I'm not going to tread over old ground about, Keith's anti-union lines, but, he's just 100%, he should be sending solidarity. And it just shows how pathetic the Ford report even is. The Paul Waugh from The Independent tweeted out that people talking about Sam Tarry were saying, oh, well, he's going to get fucked when the deselection express, quote unquote, comes along. And I was like, this factional infighting, they're happy. They don't care there's factional infighting as long as it targets the left. They can give a shit, right? And the media are happy to amplify the factional infighting whilst maintaining no coverage about the Ford report and what that did internally within the party. But that is quite a long digression. But yeah, you should support the RMT. Liz Truss is an incredibly dangerous woman. If you've got a picket line that you can go out to in future, you should absolutely go out. Unfortunately, I have a job to do, so I couldn't be there today. But show your support online. Continue to let your friends know, and most of all, join a fucking union. Right? If that general strike comes along, you're going to need to be there on the front lines as well, so that we all know what we will do in the case that Liz Truss wants to completely curtail our union rights. Join the union and come out and join the general strike if one ends up happening, because we'll need you there, 100%. And if you're unhappy with low wages, poor conditions, little if no pension provision, then you should join a union and fight for your rights as well. Right. Go to tec.co.uk/join union and you can find out where to sign up and join the movement for better work, jobs, pay, and conditions moving forward. Thank you very much for watching, future YouTube viewers. I hope you enjoyed that segment. You can watch that live on my Twitch stream, which is in the link in bio. I will be live most days of the week. And if you could click the like and the subscribe button and ring that bell, will let you know when I go live on YouTube too. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, after that YouTube segment's finished, we're now going to watch some more LBC content. I think it's actually more James O'Brien. Might record this as a separate segment, but let's have a look and see what he has to say here. You're just jealous. James O'Brien dissects callers' opposition to striking workers. So yeah, as we saw in that last segment, we've seen James O'Brien be pretty pro-strike, which is surprising considering how much of a shitlib that he is. So good to see him defending the right to strike and also defending them not just against parliamentarians, but against members of the public as well on his call-in show. Should be interesting to see the points that he makes up, and we'll have a look and see what happens.
I was in the armed forces as a very young officer for about 8-10 years, and I was on a short service commission, which effectively means, for gig economy. I didn't know this at the time, but I was made redundant without any redundancy pay. I was actually just summarily dismissed because they decided to remodel and reshape the armed forces for the future, and this goes on all the time. So I don't really buy the argument that you can't change someone's terms and conditions when the current climate, technology advances, things are happening and changing all the time.
No, but you said you didn't realise what your terms and conditions were.
Well, I was 19 when I signed up for the Army.
Yes.
I got commissioned as an officer. I thought I was in for life, and I committed my life to the Army. I went on some pretty horrendous operational tours. No pay rises, no ability to strike, no Crown immunity.
Yes.
All these things happened.
And no rights or protections when they decided to get rid of you. So I'm not quite sure what you're.
Are you 2 weeks' notice?
Yes, I know that's right. That's appalling. Are you suggesting that because that happened to you, you're in favour of it happening to other people?
No, but what
are you suggesting then?
I'm suggesting that things do change, and you have to sit down there at the table and negotiate and compromise
But
both sides.
that's what they're doing. You didn't
Yeah, that's literally what the union is there for. They're trying to negotiate. They're not been given a satisfactory settlement, so they're striking. Very simple.
have that right. And Liz
No, I
Truss,
didn't.
Liz Truss is pledging to take that right away.
No, and I don't agree with that. But what I do agree with is the idea that there are reasonable things happening right now that people are making big sacrifices for in the private sector as well. So the idea of just saying we're going to strike and make your lives a misery unless you give us more money, when I then and I may not be
They just want
figures,
a pay rise that recognises inflation, because if they don't get a pay rise that outstrips inflation, then every year they're earning less than the year before.
So in the private sector, I've not had a pay rise for 8 years.
You
Do I
are
just go
doing
on
that
strike
thing,
all
Paul.
the
Let's
way?
not let Paul, mate. You may not realise it, but you are very much, and I'm very grateful to you for ringing in, because I think you speak for millions. You're jealous.
Not so much. What I am more concerned about,
absolutely, and categorically, no, you're jealous. You're literally telling me.
James absolutely knocking out of the park here. She's like, it's the typical like British race to the bottom mindset that they have. Nothing can ever get better. Things can only get worse, and anybody who doesn't accept things getting worse should get down here with the trough with the rest of us, and just accept how miserable life is. Right? It's all a race to the bottom, and they feel like it's edifying by the acceptance of misery. They feel like that there's some kind of innate, charm or spirit, some kind of, I guess it's kind of the Weber's Protestant work ethic type thing of saying that you should be happy with the lot that you're given, and by being stoic in the face of it, that is somehow some kind of great personal achievement. When it's not, there's nothing edifying about that at all.
That you got shafted by your employer in the past, so you don't see why these employees should have any right of recourse with their employers. They should suck it up just like you had to. And now you're telling me that in your current working life, you don't have protections, you don't have a union speaking up for you, so why the hell should the railway workers have one?
No, honestly, no. I don't believe they shouldn't have a union, but I believe the union are wielding too much power in the sense that they can bring a country to its knees pretty much at
How much
will.
power do you think they should be allowed to have, Paul?
Sufficient to sit around the table and negotiate and compromise on behalf of their members.
And if the employer doesn't compromise?
Say again?
If the employer doesn't compromise, then what should they be allowed to do?
Then there should be recourse to a higher body, to an arbitration committee that says you're being unreasonable.
The government's refusing to speak to the unions.
And they're at fault as well. We shouldn't be voting for a government that don't sit around the table.
Unfortunately, that's the government we've got, and that's the government that the unions have to deal with. So if they can't go on strike, what can they do to stop employers treating them like you were treated as a young man?
Well, I'm not sure.
Just pause for a minute. Just think about the question, Paul. No, wait, because I don't want the railway workers to be treated like you were when you were slung out of the army.
No, I agree.
All right? So if they're going to do that to a workforce, what can the union do to stop it from happening?
What this guy is trying to say is he wants an Australian-style system where they have as a Fair Work Commission, which essentially hamstrings the ability of workers to be able to strike. Right? Strikes can only be issued if by going through this Fair Work Commission, which basically means that the power of the unions in Australia has been completely neutered. There's an excellent video by Bad Empanada about that. It's definitely worth watching.
Well, I mean, the only recourse other than strike action would be some case of law that protects them, that forces the government to get around the table and negotiate.
Liz Truss, I just played you a clip of Liz Truss promising to water down the law that currently protects workers. So in the world we live in, a trade union that wants to protect its members from being treated in the way you were treated as a young man, what weapon would you allow them to have?
Well, I think we have enough frameworks and structures in our country now to
but we clearly don't.
sit around the table and
negotiate.
But
we clearly don't, because that is.
So the framework that we have at the moment is people being able to go on strike. That's why we avoided. That's how they managed to get a pay deal with British Airways. That's how they managed to get a pay deal with the bin workers in I think it was Chesterfield, or was it Mansfield? I forget now. That's why they managed to get pay deals at plenty of other places. They threatened to go on strike, and so a negotiated settlement was reached. But the reason why there's going to be strikes on the trains, and why there's going to be strikes in the postal service, and why there's going to be strikes in BT, is because they went to the table, they tried to negotiate, and they didn't give them a satisfactory settlement. So they're wielding the power that they have, which is to go on strike. This balance has existed here for a very, very long time. A very very curtailed ability they've had since kind of the Thatcher regime. Right? It's not really happened many times that much as it is right now in the wake of COVID-19. But then, of course, COVID-19 allowed so many of the rich people in society to scarper off with all of the money, leaving everybody else in the dirt. So, of course, everyone's going to go on strike, especially when inflation is 11%.
What they are doing. So when
So we
the
need to go to a
employer,
higher body. We need to go to the
you
Supreme
keep
Court to
repeating
just stop
yourself because
councils, stop the-
you know, Paul, that the
Yeah.
only truly meaningful recourse they have is industrial action, and you've realised that in the course of this conversation. And I don't want to embarrass you by labouring the point, but that is precisely what we've been talking about all morning, because you didn't get looked after when you felt you should have been. You've been turned into a person who doesn't think other people should be looked after either, because you can talk all you like about arbitration or compromises or legislative frameworks. This is a government, and Liz Truss's government is clearly going to be committed to this, that wants to strip away the protections that they already have. And you've been persuaded that that's a good idea, largely because you don't have any yourself.
Okay, I think it's slightly over-pegging it there, James. I don't believe they should.
You know
have
everyone's
unions.
listening,
That there
don't
should be a structure where the government don't have the ability to say we're not talking to you, and that the unions don't have a retort to say, well, in that case we're going on strike. If that's the only option, that's not adult. That's not sensible. We need to have a different kind of structure that says.
Well, no, you
what's
see,
the fair pay
you're
for a
so
trade
nearly, you're
worker?
so nearly there. Then, so I mean, here's the point: if an employer is as inconsiderate and as unreasonable as the army was to you, what could, if all of you and your comrades were in an organisation dedicated to protecting you and your comrades from unfair employment practices, from exploitative employment practices, what could you do to fight back?
Yeah, okay, so let me just be absolutely clear. I don't think I was exploited in that sense. I mean, I was on a contract that I should have known better. I should have known at 19 what my employment contract was.
Yeah, so
my
but
point of that, James, was
No, yeah. So if you were put into a contract, signed up to a contract that you didn't really understand because it wasn't properly explained to you, because the army specifically is an incredibly fucking predatory employer who deliberately tries to obfuscate what they really do and don't do in the contracts people sign up to with a bunch of they to be fair, they do give plenty of good benefits you get for being in the army, and they entice people in with these. They entice people in with the rhetoric as well of, or you're going to serve the country by killing Afghan children, right? They think that's serving. You'll go home a hero. I'll join the army, be a hero today, right? They suck you in with that, and then cajole you into signing work contracts that are less than ideal.
Could you all have done collectively together to resist unfair treatment? What would have been the most effective weapon in your arsenal? An unfair treatment from your employer directed at a small number of your comrades, but you're all going to join forces to resist it. What would be the most effective way of resisting it, Paul?
Well, I don't agree with it, but it would have been to lay down our weapons and not do what we were signed up to do. It would be to completely, to don't turn up to work.
So so the only
The whole
recourse to justice that you had is something that you don't agree with. I mean, the army is a
like literally, you had to withdraw your labour, as simple as that. And there's plenty of people, right? The problem is that what they could do, like, so for example, people talk about striking bus drivers in, I think it was in Japan, I think it might have been in Korea, where they went on strike. They still went to work, but what they did was refuse to take ticket money. Essentially, use that to be able to keep the services running whilst hamstringing the profits of the people who pay their wages. Right? That was their strike action. In the UK, this is illegal. They're explicitly trying to make it so that you either have the ability to go on strike or the service runs as normal. You can't have this compromise, which is good for everybody else, good for the whole country and bad for the employer, because that kind of action is not allowed anymore. That's literally, it would be illegal for them to do that. That would be the ideal strike action, and I'm sure Mick Lynch would agree with me. I'm sure members of the RMT and other unions would agree with me that being able to, use strike action as a way of making sure that the services still run, but the profits of the train operators would get curtailed by the action, would be the best of both worlds for everybody.
special case, of course, but you wouldn't extend that to railway
if your
workers.
father's on an operating table and all the surgeons go on strike, what do you do? Do you think, oh, that's fine, they need more money because they're working really hard, but my dad just died of a heart attack on an operating table? That's where I don't agree. If nurses can go on strike,
we both know,
go on
don't
strike.
we, that they're not going to go out on strike in the middle of an operation, Paul. So again, I don't want to embarrass you, but we're talking about railway workers today, and and I think still I'm not going to be able to quite crack the final nut here, but your opposition to industrial action is built upon envy, because you don't have recourse to those sorts of protections and rights. And here's the thing that perhaps I should have said a little earlier. I think you deserve them too.
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure that would work with the armed forces. If
you're not in the armed forces, Paul. They threw you out. because you didn't understand your terms and conditions and you didn't have a
And
union.
also, it would work with the armed forces. Just don't fight. Don't go. Don't put down your weapons, like you literally said. That would literally just stop fighting. Like,
I think you deserve them too. And the mystery
Okay.
of today's phone-in is why you don't think you deserve them.
Well, but, you sign up to a job, you do the job as best as you can. Things do change, and you have to adapt. And if that means you need less soldiers and less officers, then some have to go.
They're
and
not
I
in the
reckon
army
all that
anymore.
went. No, but you're referring back to that situation.
No,
I
I'm not.
went
I'm
because
talking about
they
you
need to have
today.
less soldiers and officers in
Today,
the armed forces.
right now, I think you deserve the protection and the dignity that a union can afford, and I'm very, very sorry that you don't have it.
Okay. Can I make one very final point? Because I did say two. And the last one is this, and I may have the exact figures wrong, but my understanding is a junior doctor does about 7 years' worth of training and comes out on about 40 grand a year as a junior doctor in a ward somewhere.
and the junior doctors went on strike when Jeremy Hunt tried to impose crappy contracts on them. They had the power to use industrial action, and they took that action.
Something like that, I'm led to believe, and you may tell me it's a lot less or a lot more, but I'm pretty sure it's about 40 grand.
And your
And
point
as I
is?
understand it, an average train driver's on about 48 grand, they want more.
We've
It's not the train drivers; it's the support staff.
already covered this. Number one, the train drivers aren't on strike today. And number two, that is an argument for paying doctors more, not for paying railway workers less, Paul.
Why is it not the other way around? Why is it not that the doctors are getting enough and the train drivers are getting too much? How is that not a valid argument?
Because the doctors don't have the union strength that the railway workers have. And just like you, I wish they did, just like I wish you did. Do you see it
But
now?
is £48,000
Do
the
you
right
get
amount
it?
of money
You just
for
made
someone
that
to push a
number.
lever forward or backwards and drive a train?
Oh,
Is
and
that-
now
is
you're
that an
getting that. So
appropriate
now we're going
salary?
down. Now we're going down the Rupert Murdoch route. I mean, what do you want me to do? Remind you of the recent rail disasters where people have died? Well, you
No, I get
pretend that
that.
it's a trivial job. Just
But
accept
no,
the
not-
generous.
No, James. No, I'm not saying
Just
it's trivial.
accept
What
the
I'm saying is
generous
they're
and
paid
what
enough-
you
they're
are.
paid
You're just
enough-
saying pushing a lever
No.
all day long. That is a
Yeah, if they
description
do
of,
their job
something
properly
trivial.
and
All
stop
right,
to
I've done my best.
James,
I've
if they
done
do
my
their-
best, Paul. I wish that you had access to the sort of rights and protections that railway workers have.
Wow, incredibly based and red-pilled from James O'Brien. There, I never thought I would see the day where I saw him and be the champion of the proletariat. But there you go, and he was just 100% correct there. And it's just always this race to the bottom. This race to the bottom of no one can have anything nice. Anyone who wants anything nice lives in a fantasy world. Everyone else should be miserable like me, and I'm not going to take steps to make sure that I can curtail my own misery as well. It's
Okay, playtime.
It's absolutely psychotic. It's absolutely psychotic from these people. Oh, got another Nick Ferrari clip with Mick Lynch in it, so I guess we're going to watch this one as well.
8:33 is the time. Come back to our conversation about those league tables. Pleased to say now we are joined by Mick Lynch, who is, of course, the boss of the RMT. He's joining us from that picket line at London's Euston Station. He's with me now, and you may be aware the Daily Mirror has an interview with you. Indeed, it's the front page today, Mr. Lynch, in which you say we're at a crossroads. Anti-union proposals coming on the back of the misery caused by the cost of living crisis. You say it's time for workers across the country, whether you're a member of a union or not, to take a stand before it's too late. Too late for what, Mr. Lynch? What would happen? Good morning.
Well, it looks like we're facing a government based on an even more extreme right-wing version of conservatism, and Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and I've just heard Grant Shapps are all proposing another raft of anti-trade union laws that will in effect make industrial action, that's meaningful industrial action, illegal in this country if they get their way. Now, we'll have to see how that gets through Parliament and what form it comes through, but what they're saying to us is that we don't want any action, we don't want workers to be able to express themselves collectively, and we don't want anything that will have a meaningful effect and be able to rebalance the power in the workplace and the power in the economy. And what we've been seeing, I think, since the Cameron and Osborne government is an extension of austerity, which means wages are being driven down, conditions are being stripped out of many employment practices, and workers are fed up with it. And so the time has come, I think, for the trade union movement, the TUC and others, to get into the working class communities and say to them, there is a bit of hope. You can express yourself and you can get a better deal from the companies that are pushing down wages while dividends and shareholdings are up. We've got a band of the super rich that are getting richer every year, and there doesn't seem to be any regard for balancing wealth in this society, and it's time for the trade unions, I think, to step up to the mark on that.
Define, if you would, what...
And also, what's interesting as well is that, again, I mentioned this previously in the stream, but I was looking at a paper recently, like a economic study, showing that when you have an economy where people have a more even distribution of incomes and there's more ability to be able to participate in voluntary markets rather than involuntary markets you're forced to participate in because there are things you need to survive, right? This leads to a better functioning market as things are more, things like the ability of people to be able to start up a small business, to be able to see things better distributed, as people have more consumptive power spread across the economy rather than huge amounts of consumptive power at the top and basically none at the bottom, leads to an economy with more growth, right? Whilst also obviously having so many other externalities are even better, like having a less kind of civil unrest, a more cohesive society, right? Again, it's just further proving the failures of the neoliberal project of trickle-down economics and how that is bad for society. It's bad for kind of the societal toxicity of this kind of hyper individualism, this market fundamentalism, how that manifests in how people view society. But it's also just worse economically and for the market as well.
What is super rich? What does a man or woman have to make per annum, or what do they have to be worth to be super rich, Mr. Lynch?
Well, the super rich are the people that can live on the dividends, that own the means of production in our society. We've got the Jeff Bezos.
And this guy calls himself not a Marxist.
We've got the Elon Musk. We've got multimillionaires. We've got people.
It's a pretty small band then, in reality, isn't
it? 2 million. Well, there is a small band, and that's what's wrong with society, that it's not balanced. There are people that are working hard every day, people getting low salaries, modest salaries, and even good salaries. And then there's corporate greed, if you like. We saw last week that £2 million bonuses were being paid out in the city, while we've got 60,000 vacancies in the NHS because nurses can't afford to work for it, as well as many other ancillary and support workers. And that's the score in many workplaces in Britain at the moment.
If I can bring you back to today's event, so obviously
But he's so fucking good. But he's so fucking based. I just cannot put into words how fundamentally based this guy is.
We have another strike across the railways. We had Sir Peter Hendy on earlier in the show, and he made the claim, which I will now play to you, Mr. Lynch, that the unions have not passed on the latest offer.
We've made some offers. None of them have ever been put to their members. We think that's quite unfair that the union leadership is not allowing the members to understand what it is that we're able to offer them. 2-year 8% deal with benefits and bonuses on the table, no compulsory redundancy and 75% discounted travel.
That's the deal. Why, if Sir Peter is right, why, Mr. Lynch, have you not put that to your workforce?
We have put it to our members. We put it to our members in mass meetings of our reps. We had a meeting the other night with 600 Network Rail reps on it who represent our members right across the country. And I'll tell you what is being put to our members. I'm on a picket line here that's got a massive turnout, and people are joining our union right now, Nick. 2,500 people have joined the companies in this dispute since we started. They know exactly what this offer is, and they know that it's unacceptable.
But Mr. Lynch,
it doesn't come up to meet the mark that we've put into the dispute.
But Mr.
We have a
Lynch,
democratic structure where we consult our members, and that's exactly what we've done.
But Mr. Lynch,
oh god, and it's just fundamentally showing how participatory democracy that is more direct than the representative democracy we have in Westminster, right? Things like the unions, things like local government, things like cooperatives, right? All of these different models of participatory democracy make for better people who know more about their own rights, right? There's a really great George Carlin clip where he talks about how people, they don't want smart, free thinking, intelligent, engaged people. They want mindless drones, right? Smart enough to be able to operate the machinery, but too dumb to know the ways in which they're being ripped off and the ways in which they're being exploited. Participatory democracy, like unions, like cooperatives, where people have to understand the things that they're engaging in to be able to properly participate. This creates the level of intellectual consciousness within these people that allows them to understand things like this in a better manner. It's fantastic.
is it that you've consulted your representatives or your reps, but not the whole workforce? Just to clarify, is that the case?
Well, we haven't conducted a referendum. No, we conduct
I wasn't asking for a referendum, Mr. Lynch, but why would you not allow the entire membership to vote on it?
Well, that's what a referendum would do. We would put a vote.
But why would you not do that?
And they would vote because it comes nowhere near meeting the demands in the dispute. We've got.
Well, isn't that for the rail worker to decide, Mr. Lynch? Isn't that for the man or woman working on the railways, risking his or her life, working in the snow and the cold and the rain? Isn't it for him or her to?
I don't know why people keep saying his or her. Just say there. Everyone knows what you're talking about.
Decide?
They have decided that. Well, so we conducted a vote. Well, if you let me answer the question, Nick, that would be helpful.
It's so nice hearing people just literally tell these fucking propaganda merchants to their face, no, to stop interrupting, let me fucking finish, right?
Conducted a vote for our members on what the demands in the dispute are, and that's about getting a cost of living pay rise. We haven't had an offer that matches that. That's plain. We've asked for a set of conditions that would be negotiated with us, and Network Rail have come up with a set of conditions that do not meet the aspirations of our members. On the train operating companies, we've had no offer on pay whatsoever. We've just had a list of demands put to us that involve closing every booking office in Britain, recontracting all our members into a new set of terms and conditions. We know they're unacceptable because our members have told us that
Mr. Lynch,
in the campaign leading up to this dispute.
Respectfully, just lastly on this point, I understand you have.
It's just like would you? It's like I would like a chocolate bar. Here's a Ryvita. Oh no, but we just said we want a chocolate bar. Well, aren't you going to ask them all whether they want a Ryvita first? No, fuck it, they asked the fucking chocolate bar.
Somewhere in the region of 80 to 90,000 members. They are not allowed to vote on this deal, says Sir Peter Hendy, and your 600 reps are. I ask again, why can't the 80 plus thousand have that vote? Perhaps they are happy with 2-year 8% no compulsory redundancies, 75% discount.
There aren't 82,000 people in the union, but not 43,000 in this dispute.
Okay, well, why not ask
so
the 43,000?
Referendum. We've given. Because if we do it, we've had multiple discussions. If I put a referendum out every time I come back from a discussion,
so okay,
if we put a referendum every time I come back from a discussion, I'll be putting referendums out every day of the week.
Well, I have to say, Sir Peter is right then, isn't he?
No, he's not right. He's not right. We have consulted our members through the structures, the democratic structures and the rules of the union. That's what we do. We're very satisfied that our members support this dispute because they're here in their numbers, and from the north of Scotland down to the end of Cornwall, our members are out on strike, fully supporting the union's position, and they express themselves in that way. If they weren't happy about that, they would use the structures of the union to inform us, and they haven't done that. They support the dispute and the action that...
Literally, Nick Ferrari is doing the same logic here. Like, well, let's put every Commons vote, every single law that might theoretically get passed by the Commons needs to go to referendum first, right? It'd be pathetic.
we're taking today.
Do you think the future, as Sir Keir Starmer seems to possibly indicating, is renationalisation of the railways, Mr. Lynch?
I think that the future of the railway has got to be public ownership, because what we need is an integrated transport policy that suits the needs of the public, the travelling public, that suits the needs of the freight distribution in this country, that gets vehicles off the road and integrates with the bus services and the ferry services and all the transport systems. And I think that would be far better off democratically controlled in the hands of the people rather than in the hands of profiteers, who last year took out £500 million from our industry in profits. And that's where the funding crisis is in this industry, that privateers have been ripping us off since privatisation back in the mid-90s.
On the subject of money, I think you might have been made aware, Grant Shapps has an article in one of the newspapers today, the Daily Telegraph, in which he spells out the fact that during the pandemic, we paid £160,000 for every job on the railway to retain that post, which is £600 for every household in the country, with a total cost over 2 years of £16 billion. That was to keep you and your colleagues who do a crucial job in their jobs. Should that not be repaid now?
Well, it wasn't for that purpose. The purpose was to run the railway. So the railway has heavy engineering.
Virtually no one was on it.
It's a civil engineering project. I know virtually no one was on it. Our members were on it.
No, but during the pandemic, it was to keep...
Shapps' government told people not to go to work. And we ran the system, we ran the freight systems that functioned fully, we ran the passenger systems to get the key workers to their workplaces, and they funded the companies. They didn't fund the railway workers. The railway workers didn't get 160,000. If they got that, we wouldn't be on strike. The members that are behind me here on this picket line are on salaries of about 25 to 30,000. But what they did fund was the rolling stock leasing companies. They got £200 million of profit. The train operating companies took £200 million of profit last year, and Network Rail subcontractors took profits as well. So what they subsidised is people like Andrew Haynes and Peter Hendy, who are on £500,000 a year each. Peter Hendy gets £300,000 a year for about 1 day's work a month, and they're the ones that are telling us that our members can't have a pay rise. So they funded the train industry, the railway industry, including the private sector operators, who had lovely profits, thank you very much, from that public subsidy. Our members went to work and run the railway in return for their wages. They got nothing more and nothing less.
Finally, a word...
Yeah, like, if they just got their wages for coming to work, whilst the rest of the country all got fucking furlough. They all got their wages paid as well, and they didn't have to do the fucking work. So the idea that this is somehow a debt that they owe to the general public, when all that money, again, just got siphoned into the pockets of, as he was talking about, the rail operators, the rolling stock leasing companies, and Network Rail subcontractors, right? Then that doesn't make any fucking sense.
On a bit of a row over one of your colleagues, Eddie Dempsey, who I think is your deputy, if I've got that right, who, it is reported, lives in taxpayer-subsidised social housing in Islington Council. And as you rightly point out, you say, when did council housing become...
taxpayer given to his housing?
Yes, as you rightly point out, when did council housing become for people that are poor? You don't have to be poor. You're absolutely right, of course, Mr. Lynch, but do you not agree that he might be blocking that property for somebody who is not in receipt of a six-figure salary? That's a fair point, isn't it?
Well, he's not in receipt of a six-figure salary for starters, so I know what his salary is because he works for me and he doesn't receive a six-figure salary.
I apologise. I would imagine it's a healthy. I would imagine it's a healthy salary, though.
Six-figure salary either.
Okay, I would imagine
it's a healthy salary. He gets well paid for his job.
So
he got his council.
I understand he gets £78,200. Mr. Lynch, please. He gets £78,282.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, plus pension contributions and others. So he gets a basic salary of 70.
Yeah, that's not
should
a
he be
salary.
should he be in council accommodation if he's earning that? Is he not possibly blocking it for a family, someone who's not in receipt of that amount of money?
I don't think he is blocking it at all. What he got is his council flat that he got as a person on the register when he was a railway worker. And he and his partner live there with his children, and they have a tenancy like all council tenants do.
Yes, indeed.
And when he's ready to move, I assume he'll move. It's not a question of when you earn a few more bob, you get evicted from your council
I'm not
flat.
saying
That
it
certainly
is.
didn't happen
I'm
to
not
me
saying it is.
when I lived. Well, that's what you seem to be.
No,
that's what you seem to be
what I'm
implying.
asking is
he's been
someone
in the job,
on...
He's been in the job he's got since October last year,
Right.
when he got elected to office. And before that, he was a railway worker, and he received his council flat by waiting on the list like other council tenants.
But lastly, is the
What
point
do you want him to do? Be evicted because
No.
he's got a new job?
Mr. Lynch, if you'll let me say,
Well, it seems to be what you're implying.
well, if you'd pause and allow
You
me to
seem
make...
to be implying that he shouldn't live there. It's,
Mr. Lynch, if
it's
you
his
let-
tenancy, and he pays the rent. I'm not aware that he's in receipt of any subsidy from anyone.
Mr. Lynch, if you let me make my
Are you
point...
aware that he's on some subsidy?
You're not letting me make my point respectfully. I'm only saying
Sorry.
that someone who has a salary of that level, 70+ thousand, some would say,
He's only been in since October. He's not even been paid out a full salary yet.
is in some way blocking that accommodation for families more in need. That was the point I was making.
Well, what we need is more council houses so that people
I
from all
agree.
sorts of
I
incomes
agree,
can live
but
in
currently-
mixed environments. When I was living in a council flat in the 60s and 70s with my parents, there were people from all sorts of backgrounds living in council flats. The problem is that the government stopped building council flats
Right, okay.
and houses, so that we can't have that mixed environment in our inner cities of
Okay.
people living comfortably side by side from all sorts of backgrounds. And what we need is a mixed environment of people from all income levels living cooperatively in council accommodation.
Okay.
And I don't believe he should be evicted because he's got a new job.
I totally agree with you. I've not for one moment suggested your colleague should be evicted. I'm just making the point.
I mean, I do think that it's a reasonable point. I think it's a reasonable point to say that, once he can afford to move out, once he's got, actually got the pay packet that since his election, let me remind you, in October, less than a year ago, right? He's not even been paid a full year's salary yet. Once he can afford to move out, I think that he should. I think that once you're on that level, you probably shouldn't be in a council accommodation. But again, he was just someone who worked on the railway until October, so it was well within his rights to continue that as long as he needed to. And then once he can afford to move out, that he will. Very, very simple. But there was something that was touched on then, which was that Nick Ferrari did ask Mick Lynch there if he believed that the rail should be in public ownership, right? Now, this has been a kind of thorny issue, especially for us on the left who have been, especially those who voted for Keir Starmer as Labour leader, as Keir Starmer has moved away from his pledge of renationalising swathes of the economy. Now, apparently, Rachel Reeves was on a radio interview, and she said that they wouldn't be renationalising the railways, and then somebody else from another department said that they would, like Lou Haig said that they would at some point. But regardless, I digress. There's been the union movement in general it's staked its mast now. It's explicitly said that it would like to see plenty of industries within public ownership, right? And they're 100% correct. Now, this is going to come to a head, considering that the unions are affiliated to Labour, as I've said previously. So them having diametrically opposed policy prescriptions to the Labour Party on issues such as nationalisation is going to cause a heated environment moving forward. Either way, I'm going to have a look into what the trade unions have been saying. So let's first of all start off with the man himself that we've just been listening to, Mick Lynch, talking about the public ownership and operation of the railways, which is, again, something that Labour have said that they I guess, there's been mixed messages, but the overarching theme is that they do believe that it's something they're going to look into moving forward.
Well, I think if we had the railway in public ownership, we'd properly fund it. At the minute, what's happened here is that... Well, I think if we had the railway in public ownership, we'd properly fund it. At the minute, what's happened here is that Grant Shapps and the Treasury have removed £2 billion from the funding of National Rail, and they've removed £2 billion from the funding of London Underground, and that's caused a massive gap. And this is where the savings that they're seeking to make, which comes out of the pay bill and other measures, has come from. So if we had a properly funded railway, we wouldn't have this problem. And if we had a properly funded railway, we'd have a more secure future, not just for the workers in the industry, but also for the passengers, so that we could get a proper fare structure that people get value from, and the railway will be run in the interest of the economy, in the interest of the environment, and the interest of the users. At the moment, the problem is that last year in the
Sorry, Mick. So Labour will be putting more public money in.
In the worst year for...
Sorry, Mick.
Not necessarily. Last year, in the worst year of passenger revenues, the private companies took out £500 million of profit from this industry. And that's where one of the big gaps has come from. So if we got rid of the privateers, we could concentrate on running a service for the benefit of the people.
Yeah, and he's 100% correct there. Like I said, they took away like £2 billion worth of funding, right? You remove the profiteers from that equation, instantly a quarter of that's already been recouped, right? Not they shouldn't, continue that subsidy. I think they shouldn't have gotten rid of the subsidy in the first place. But in the case where they do have to do that, huge amounts of that is already being recouped by taking away the profits that have been extracted and paid out as dividends by the private operating companies and the rolling stock leasing companies. And then again, that's not even taking into account all of the executives and the huge amounts of executive pay that get taken out by all of these private subcontractors that are part of the rail network at the time, right? So that's even more money that you could spend by having more reasonably paid managers. You can still they could probably still get a good salary. They just don't have to get £1 million payments out from the private companies who do not have the best interests of the rail network at heart, because they're driven by profit and driven by greed. And he's 100% correct. Now, what this has led to is all of the other trade unions talking about their own sectors as well, and what they believe is the case of public ownership too. So this is a tweet recently from, I think it's from a couple of days ago, by the TUC, the Trades Unions Congress, who represents all of the trade unions together. They are now calling for public ownership of energy companies. The energy cap is expected to increase to £3,200, up over 150% in just a year. That's almost double what it was previously before the last energy cap hike, right? And they are correct in saying that public ownership would reduce bills, speed up energy efficiency and improvements to homes, and cut carbon emissions faster, as we'd not be kowtowing to the needs of private investors and shareholders. We can explicitly run it for the benefit of the users and for the benefit of the environment and the country in general. The TC's affordable energy plan would keep bills down by ending shareholder dividends, making more money available to cut bills, unlocking incentives to make homes more energy efficient, and enabling pricing structures with much lower cost for basic energy needs, because you'd be able to stratify it as well, based upon the incomes of the people who are using it too. Taking the big five energy retail firms into public ownership would cost just £2.85 billion. Since June 2021, the UK government has spent £2.7 billion bailing out 20 energy companies that collapsed. So it's time to lift the burden of failed privatisation off families. And that 2.8 billion, 8.25 billion, that'd be very easy to recoup by the actual profits that are being taken out and paid out in dividends to these companies already. So it's not, again, if this is all like a profitable industry, why can't those profits being used to fund the exchequer, being used to fund social programs, be used to put back into the energy sector to be able to make things cheaper and more affordable and more green moving forward as part of a kind of more wide-ranging set of Green New Deal programs? And 100% it'd be a fair energy system for families and for the climate as well. The Green Party have called for this too, right? The Green Party, who I've been affiliated into any of the unions, have called for this too, which is interesting to see. And they also put a cute little video out about the difference between public and private ownership by comparing it to what happens in France. So let's just watch this.
In Britain, energy is run by private companies.
In France, energy is owned by everyone.
In Britain, energy bills went up by 54% this spring.
In France, our energy bills went up by only 4% this spring.
In Britain, billions in profits go to private energy companies.
In France, the profits go back to EDF, which is publicly owned by the French people, so the profits go back to us and keep the bills lower.
Wait, did you say EDF? That's the name of the energy company I use.
Yes, EDF is owned by France.
So are you saying I'm paying my energy bills to the French government?
Yes, in 2020 alone, EDF made £106 million in profit from the UK.
So if Britain had public ownership of our energy bills would be lower.
Oui?
So why don't we own our energy companies ourselves?
I don't know. You should give it a try.
%, based and correct pills. Like, you couldn't put a better argument, have a better argument than that, right? It's just like the train networks at the moment. Like, how much money do we pay out to Deutsche Bahn who own Arriva, that's owned by the German. We're paying the German government to run our railways, right? And we're paying the French government to do our energy for us. Like, we could just do this with our own fucking state. This makes no sense at all to have these continually in private ownership, right? And again, we could use that to bring the bills down. And just like we sold off British Petroleum, just like we sold off BT, just like we sold off all of these different things, I noticed I've just done a bit of a decoration here that you can see. I had to take a bunch of stuff to the tip, and the tip is run by a private company as well. And so obviously they take stuff that they can then resell from the tip, and then use that to make more money after being given all the private contracts from the government. When that money could just go back into the public sector, like we could just use that money ourselves rather than having to dole that out to private companies and their shareholders. It doesn't make any sense at all. You just pay more. You pay more if it's privately owned, right? Especially if it's privately owned contract paid out by the government. Because instead of paying for the service, i.e., the cost of the materials, the cost of the operation, and then the cost of the labour, you then also on top of that have to pay out any additional amounts of profit, because if profit wasn't being taken out of that, the private companies would not be getting involved, right? If it's the public sector doing that, you don't have to pay that bit. You just pay the workers, you pay for the labour, right? You pay for the materials, and you actually pay for the operation. It's really, really simple. It's just cheaper and better to do things in the public sector rather than subcontracting it out to private companies to do so. If that, for things like, waste collection or whatever it is. And they do a worse job. They're incentivized to cut corners. They're incentivized to maximize profit, not deliver a good service, because there's no competition. The competition is just who gets the private contract, which again is usually done by the people who have the brown envelopes that's been passed to them to be able to fast track the queue to get those contracts. We saw it during COVID, where huge amounts of PPE that was bought by the government from contracts that they gave to their mates in the private sector. We had to throw away all that PPE because it was substandard. Because it didn't matter about whether they delivered a good quality product or not. All that mattered was they took away profits and paid out dividends at the end of it. It's completely nonsensical to do that. And when you look at energy companies where there's no competition, because Ofgem have kiboshed any competition by making it really difficult for you to switch retailers and for the profits and for the people who sell the lower priced energy to be able to make more revenue, as they have to pay out money to the people who offered the higher tariff if you switch. That's true. You can watch the Martin Lewis video about it. We just don't have a functioning system. It's not functioning. It's a natural monopoly, so competition is really difficult to begin with anyway, no matter what neoliberals will tell you. The demand curve on this is incredibly inelastic. You can't not heat your home during winter. So it makes perfect sense. And some of the unions have gone even further than recommending public ownership of our utilities and things like that. They've come for the Labour leader himself. This is CWU saying that Keir Starmer had forgotten that he wrote to their General Secretary Dave Ward, absolute legend, go and follow him, when he stood for Labour leader, that they had a commitment to renationalise Royal Mail and other industries. And yet here he is on TV saying that that's not true.
How about Royal Mail nationalised within the fiscal rules? Different, because
how about Royal Mail then?
Rail is virtually, or large parts are in public ownership of rail, and we wouldn't alter that.
Sure. Royal Mail?
On Mail, it's pragmatic rather than ideological. But Ed, what I would say is this: that
is that
I gave a major speech
not?
yesterday on growth. No, I think, look, it's very hard to see how you can nationalise within the fiscal rules. Different, because
how about Royal Mail then?
Rail.
Okay, so you're saying you're pragmatic, not ideological, yet you have a fixed set of rules. That sounds pretty ideological to me, right? Whereas you could be, say, for example, pragmatic about, I don't know, something like the energy companies in a post-COVID world where the cost of living crisis and CPI is predominantly driven by energy costs. The biggest driver of CPI is energy costs. And so it makes a no-brainer. And he says, I spoke about this previously on my stream, where he was on LBC saying that, oh, well, I said that at the time when I was trying to get elected as Labour leader, that I want to renationalise energy company, but the circumstances have changed. I'm like, yes, they have changed, Keith. They've changed such that it's even more of a good plan to renationalise these energy companies. When we've seen the difference in how much bills have gone up over here compared to how much they've gone up in France, because the French government had the power to restrict them to a 4% rise in energy bills. If anything, all of this time, all of the change in economic circumstances has made the case for nationalisation even stronger. And so again, it's just nonsense. It's just nonsense, kind of dithering and blabbering and just making up any old nonsense that he can to avoid doing the things that, regardless of the pragmatism, it is ideological. That's where the lie is. The pragmatic approach would be to use the power of the state to make things better for both the workers and also the people who have to pay their energy bills. So it doesn't make any fucking sense. And plenty of people in the replies going, well, why don't you disaffiliate from Labour? Like, if they're just lying to you and not giving you the things that you agreed on when he was running for leader, just disaffiliate from the party if they're not giving you what you want. They're not supporting the strikes. They're not supporting the unions. They're punishing people who go to picket lines from the front bench, right? All that kind of stuff. And now they've admitted that they lied to you. You're telling us that they lied to you when he tried to become leader as well. So why don't just fucking disaffiliate, right? I saw a tweet coming out from somebody who said that, oh, well, I know some of us do believe in common ownership, but we need to look past outdated 20th century models and look at things that are going to be pragmatic in the short term, that we can afford, and that there's public support for. When, like, first of all, it doesn't matter whether it's a 20th century model. It works in other countries. Let's just fucking do it here. There's no reason to not do it here when it works in other countries that have similar economies to ours just fine. Second of all, it's absolutely fiscally responsible. And he's already admitted he's happy to earmark loads of money for climate change, which he should do. But infrastructure spending isn't inflationary. It's absolutely fine to be able to, issue bonds or gilts to be able to get the revenue to be able to buy out the energy companies to nationalise them, and then reap the rewards of the profits that would be given to the shareholders of these energy companies, then go back into the exchequer to pay that down. Right? That's a thing that they theoretically can do, and it's absolutely fiscally responsible. And third of all, people saying, oh, well, it's not, we don't think that it is electorally viable, when literally a super majority of people in this country think that energy companies and train operating companies should be under public control. Like, look at these things right here. Things like Royal Mail. Royal Mail is even bigger than the energy companies, and that was one of the ones that new CWU were talking about. Rail companies, water companies are absolutely just destroying the country. They're literally pumping actual human feces into our water, running away with huge amounts of money, and people talking about, oh, how we're having such a big issue with wastewater, so much so that we think that people should be put on kind of rationings about how much water they can use. Things like hosepipe bans. I'm like, hang on a minute. The private companies that are fleecing the government, destroying our natural habitats with poo, literal actual poo, right? And then on top of that, wasting huge amounts of water and money, and then just paying sums and fines to the government to be able to cover up the cracks that should never have existed in the first place, right? Even then, there is still public support to bring these back under public ownership, and they would function better. The privatisation of rail, the privatisation of mail, the privatisation of water, the privatisation of energy, they've all failed. We have overwhelming evidence to say that they do. We have overwhelming support showing that people want them to be renationalised as well. So all of these claims that the Labour right meeting was not viable, both electorally and fiscally, absolute bullshit and nonsense. The trade unions are right, the people who are surveyed are right, and the evidence will show it, and I'm fucking right. Right? Come on, Keith. Do what people want you to do. Like, literally, the Guardian article here saying he would fix broken water energy markets through regulation. The regulators that we have, Ofwat and Ofgem, have let this happen. The price cap that's been raised, the new dividends that have been allowed to be taken out, the lack of competition, the ability for water companies to inject sewage into our waters and waste huge amounts of water, this has happened under the guise of supposed regulation. The regulation doesn't work. It's never worked. Just put them under public control, for the love of fucking God. Literally, as absolute base leftist shitposter Mark Harks here says, we've already have industry regulators and they failed in their remit. Owner nationalisation will kick the profiteers out of the system and bring real benefits to the people. True. 100% correct. And he's also pointed out here that the water company responsible for 25% of major pollution incidents last year gave its CEO £1.3 million in pay and bonuses and nearly £100 million in dividends. Another thing about this is pragmatic. It's ideological devotion to private sector ripping us off and a commitment to neoliberalism, right? He's committed to this neoliberal framing, and that is his ideology. And if anything, all of that stuff that we've gone through there proves that it is all completely ideological. It's as simple as that. There's no way of getting around the. Keith is a liberal. He's not a socialist. He doesn't care about the trade unions. He doesn't care about the people. All he wants to do is get into the power for the sake of power, and then he'll just do more of the same continuity neoliberalism. It's pathetic, and he needs to change his tactic. Otherwise, Liz Truss, like it's coming up to the point where Liz Truss is being equal with him in polling about preferred prime minister. So he's going to have to buck his ideas up and get some actual policies under his belt that help people. Otherwise, we might be staring down the barrel of another Tory government at the next election, which, after all of this, is absolutely fucking unthinkable. Anyway, if you enjoyed this segment, please do consider subscribing and liking the video on YouTube. If you want to click the bell, it'll notify you when I go live and when I upload content. And if you want to go into the description of this video down below as well, it'll allow you to find me on Twitch, where you can follow me, where I will always be live streaming. Only sometimes live stream on YouTube for copyright reasons. So please do follow me on Twitch, and you can also subscribe there, drop some bits if you feel like contributing. Any contribution is always helpful, but never ever expected. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Yeah, it's been an angry stream so far, but I got some good content out of it at the very least. Thank you, Popey, as well. Much appreciated, as always. Holy shit! Fucking Sam Tarry has been sacked. Also, let's just have a look at just how completely fucking disingenuous like the Tories are. When literally he's talking about the idea that they gave rail workers £600 per household, when no, half that just went to fucking the private sector. The majority of that, rather. And apparently RMT were going to refusing an 8% pay rise. Let's be real, that's over 3 years, right? When inflation is probably going to increase further moving forward. So it's below inflation now, and will probably even further below inflation, come 3 years down the line, right? And he's also said that he urges Labour to call off the union bosses. RMT are affiliated to Tusk. They're not affiliated to Labour. They've not been an affiliated union for the last fucking 18 years. This is just an absolute fucking lie. I didn't even show you the tweet. There you go. There's the tweet that I was just talking about there. Like, he's just absolutely lying. Just, yeah. The workers got no pay rises whilst the rail companies pay tens of millions dollars in dividends after getting billions in public money. Remind me which side I should be cross with then, John. Literally, just lies upon lies upon lies. What the fuck are you supposed to do when people just lie this absolutely blatantly? Let me have a look. Sienna Rogers was covering it. Just a little bit of extra on top of the segment I did previously about Labour members joining the picket lines, which was including Sam Tarry, who was, at that time of recording, was a shadow Secretary of State for Transport, and he's just been sacked from the front bench for attending a picket line. The Labour spokesperson said, the Labour Party will always stand up for working people fighting for better pay terms and conditions at work. This isn't about appearing on a picket line. Members of the front bench sign up to collective responsibility. This includes media appearances being approved and speaking to agreed front bench positions. As a government in waiting, any breach of collective responsibility, not collective responsibility to, the workers or the strikers or the people who are, using their power of withdrawing their labour to be able to get a pay rise, showing solidarity with them. Apparently, being part of that kind of collective responsibility, that's a big no-no. It's all about looking good on camera for Keith and co. As a government in waiting, any breach of collective responsibility is taken extremely seriously, and for these reasons, Sam Tarry has been removed from the front bench. Sam Tarry says, it's been a privilege to serve on Labour's front bench for the past years, and I have had the opportunity to speak up for hard-pressed workers who deserve so much better than the treatment they've got from this corrupt and out-of-touch government. I remain committed to supporting the striking rail workers and campaigning for Labour victory at the next general election, which I'll fight for relentlessly from the backbenches. So, I mean, at the point at which he was looking getting deselected, it's you might as well have done it. Almost probably. I mean, it was gonna happen eventually, but whatever. Like, it just shows how much a fucking scab Keith is at this point. Doesn't care. He doesn't really care. It's all a fucking media appearances to him, but whatever. This is all incredibly expected, but especially since he's facing deselection, the war against him was there to begin with from the right of the party, so it's again completely unsurprising. And then if he was going to expect to lose his job, then he might as well just do whatever the fuck he wants. To be honest, like, go for it, dude. Yeah. Starmer directly taking orders from Grant Shapps. Nice. Yeah, true. Very, very true. Even Prem Sick has come out in favour.
Fuck off.
I'll have to use that clip more often. Like, how can unions stay affiliated to this? Literally, like, was it like this? The guy called himself a trade unionist previously. Absolute nonsense. Or is there anything on YouTube that we can watch as a palate cleanser? What have I got in my What have I got on my watch later? Well, let's watch Eddie Dempsey. Eddie Dempsey's always good work.
Why is the RMT striking today?
We're striking because our members are now in the third year of a pay freeze, a lot of them. We're being told that $2 billion is being stripped out of our industry, and that means thousands of jobs have to be cut out, working conditions have to be torn up, and our people have to be made redundant. And this is at a time when massive profits are being taken out of our industry, and our members aren't going to accept that.
Can you put a bit more context on the level of wealth inequality within the industry? Because, like you said, profits are being made, aren't they? There's money moving around.
Loads of money. So there's 500 million every year being made in cold money, profits, with these private companies. We've got organisations called rolling stock leasing companies, which basically take taxpayers' money, buy trains, and then lease them back to the railway at extortionate rates. They took $3 billion in the worst year of the health emergency. Lots of that money we've shown leaves this country, ends up in Guernsey, ends up in Luxembourg, Cayman Islands, and places like that. We've just seen First Group, which is one of the biggest employers in the rail industry, post massive profits. Just yesterday, I think they've got their AGM today. They're going to pay out 8.1 million in dividends. Their CEO, he's going to earn up to 1.6 million. So our members are looking at that, and they're not stupid. They see where their money's going, and it's going out of this country and into tax havens when it should be going into their pockets.
This touches on broader themes, doesn't it? It's not just about obviously it's important, but it's not just about the workers here. You're talking about tax avoidance, you're talking about wealth inequality. These are broader issues in British society.
So what we've seen for the last 30, well, for my whole life really, we've seen living standards falling. We've seen wages not keeping up with inflation. At the same time, profits have been escalating and going through the roof. Profits have really not exceeded inflation over the last 30, 40 years. And at the same time, our public services are being eaten alive by these private companies. They're in our NHS, they're in our railways. We've seen our education commodified, we've seen our social housing sold off, we've seen our pensions plundered. And we say that can't carry on. If we don't do something about that, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where people are going to be really struggling in this country for years and years to come. And it can't carry on like that. We've got to do something about it.
You're making these arguments right now. You have been for the last couple of weeks whilst this industrial action has been going on. And we've seen it here, which is why we've been today. You know, you've got people beeping their horns, firefighters giving you the thumbs up. There's public support for this.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
In a way that perhaps there hasn't been in the past. I mean, you mentioned to me earlier that railway workers and strikers were kind of seen as the bad guys in the past.
Well, we've got public support, despite the best efforts of the media, to try and pitch railway workers against nurses, teachers against railway workers. They always try to play the division card. But at the bottom of it, everyone in this country knows that they're being mugged. They know, deep down in their hearts, when their kids are going to university and they're being loaded with debt, when they can't get social housing, when they can't retire in dignity. I don't know what your parents are doing. My father worked his whole life. He's living in a council flat on a state pension and I've got to look after him. Now that's not right, not in the sixth richest economy on the planet, not when people are taking profits out of this country at an extortionate rate. That's got to be stopped, and the government's answer to the cost of living crisis is to push wages down, to criminalise dissent against poverty, and to let profits and let prices rip. And we've
so fucking based. I wish I could interject with some like actual commentary here, like as is my job. But he's just so correct.
That's got to be changed. We need a redistributive set of politics in this country that takes those profits and puts them where they need to be, in public services, in the pockets of working class families, and making sure that people can retire in dignity.
Why don't you think anyone's making these arguments within British electoral politics?
Well, you'd have to ask some of the politicians, but I think the politicians in this country really are aligned with the big corporations. I think they should have to wear their sponsors on their suits and on their dresses when they go into that place over there. They'd look like Formula One drivers if they did. I think Liz Truss, she'd have a Pfizer sticker on her forehead and another corporation on her elbow, if you like. That's where it is. So these people don't represent the interests of the people in this country. They represent the interests of big corporations who are taking this country for a ride, and that has got to stop.
In the Tory leadership debate, not last night, the one before, both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss were asked whether they would legally ban strikes in essential services, and they both immediately said, yes, I will. What's your response to that?
Well, right now, according to the Global Trade Union Congress, they do an index of trade union freedoms around the world every year. We're on the same level as Russia, right now, and that's regular and systematic
that's another thing that we have in common with Russia, just like our record on LGBT rights.
Violations of trade union freedoms in this country, the right to bargain, the right to join a union, the right to take action and the rest of it. She wants to criminalise dissent against poverty. And if you look at what's happened, the reason people are so poor and not doing so well in the economy now is because successive governments have tried to, through politics, take away the ability of working people to bargain for better wages. Now, the Bank of International Settlements just did a study into whether there's actually a risk of a wage price spiral. So they keep saying you can't have a pay rise because we're going to have a wage price spiral. Well, that's just a free card trick designed to keep people skint, because if you look at what's really going on, as I said, the Bank of International Settlements has shown the inflationary impact of wages across developed economies in the West now is at zero or in negative terms. If you go back 30 years, the share of wealth that was accrued through sales in the economy that went to wages was much higher, and the share that went to profits was much lower. That's completely reversed. Right now, the vast majority of it goes in the form of profits. So if you've got rising demand because the supply side of the economy's screwed up through the global wealth emergency, you've got prices going up but wages being capped. All that means is that more is being taken out in profits. It doesn't mean anyone's getting a fair shake. It just means more profits are being taken at the expense of workers' wages, and that has got to change. And all this talk about a wage price spiral is just a free card trick designed to keep people poor.
There's power in the union.
There is power in the union, and that is why the government's policy.
He's so fucking based. I just can't fault him. I can't comment anything because he's being so perfectly he's circuitous in his description of the issues that we have. When we're talking about the way in, again, essentially, he's explaining what's happened because of this kind of dogmatic religious belief that neoliberals have in trickle-down economics.
Is to take away our ability to bargain for workers, because what they're worried about isn't a wage price spiral. They're not even worried about whether we get a good pay rise this year. What they're really worried about in this country is a shift in class power. They're worried about the ability of people like me and people like you see behind me being able to get pay rises next year and the year after that eats into profits. That's what this is really about.
Just finally, Eddie, a word on, we were talking before we started rolling about the other strikes going on.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a lot of media attention on this one. probably because people are not being able to catch the trains today. But there's many other strikes going on, they're just as important.
They are just as important. I think the media attention's on us because we were the first out of the traps, really, that's all. So we've got the posties coming out. We're seeing the FBU, the fire brigades warming up. They're getting ready for strike action. The teachers are going to be looking at strike action later on in this year. We see in the NHS people getting ready for that. And I think that's right. Why should you put up with falling living standards year on year forever? Because you're not just consigning your own people now to finding it hard in the cost of living crisis. This is about our children. This is about what type of country we have. And I think everyone in this country wants some very basic things. You want a wage you can live on. You want a house you can live in and raise a family in. You want a health service that's going to look after you when you're sick. You want education for your kids, and you want to be able to retire in dignity. And every one of those things comes into conflict with the private ownership of our economy. And that's where the fight is. Really, this is about who owns what. Are we going to have a country that's run for corporations with some people in it? Or are we going to have a country that's run for the people in it that's got some corporations? And I know what I want.
Cheers, Eddie.
No worries, mate.
100%, he's absolutely right. You know what I was saying previously about class war? Right? It is class war. It's bourgeoisie versus proletariat. Should the economy work for the people, or should the people work for the economy? And one group wants one thing, and the other group wants the other. He's absolutely correct in his analysis. Just in the same way that Mick Lynch was correct in his earlier analysis, that the issue is that the people with the power are the ones who owns the means of production. Like he says he's not a Marxist. I know all about you, Mick. I've got you pegged. Yeah. Absolutely fucking based. Absolutely based. Hope the comments are good. I find it extraordinary that everyone I've heard from the unions has been articulate, unscripted, and passionate in their beliefs. The flip side of the coin is to our esteemed politicians with their soundbites and U-turn policies, the flounder-like landed fish, the mere thought of answering anything truthfully. The British public deserve, and I, for one, hope the unions carry on fighting for the common man and force change in every way. Bring on the general strike. What a fucking absolutely true. Oh, what an absolute legend. Everyone should fucking watch it. Everyone should watch this video. Oh, I'm gonna post it to Facebook right now. What an absolute legend. Anyway, what we're going to watch next, I touched on it in a previous segment, but I'm going to let this guy do the talking. This is friend of the show, Turn Left, talking about the member of the public, member of the Labour Party, who accosted Starmer, talking about his decision to undermine the promises that he made when he was running to be the leader of the Labour Party. And it's pretty good video. I showed the video on stream previously, but this is a guy called Curtis Daly. He does really, really, really good content. Everyone, I mean everybody, should go and fucking subscribe to his channel. He's very, very good. We're going to watch this piece here and see what he has to say about this incident.
So Keir Starmer visited Liverpool on Monday. Note that it wasn't a big announcement like his usual tours, but that's because he probably knew that many in the city wouldn't be happy with him. If that was his suspicions, then he would have been proved correctly, as he was approached by a woman who gave the leader a rude awakening. Take a look.
I don't know how you've got the guts to come to this city after you have been being interviewed and doing columns for the Sun newspaper, after the way we as a city were abused, and after the way we as a city, the Hillsborough victims were abused by that paper, and you've come here. Secondly, you lied to us about uniting the party. I'm still a Labour Party member, and you've expelled and witch-hunted in the most vicious way I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been a member of the Labour Party for a long, long time. You have absolutely said you had 10 pledges, You were going to carry on the Corbyn legacy. And ever since, you've done nothing but distance yourself from the ideas which tens of thousands of people joined the Labour Party to support. And all you've done is...
Well, fucking Scousers are absolutely... I fucking love people from Liverpool. Best city in the country, no doubt.
Feed into the Tory ideology of not supporting strikes, of carrying on with the privatisation of our health service. You're doing everything to feed into a Tory victory. Because we may as well have a Tory if we have a person like you who lies to the party. It's a dishonesty.
Thank you very much.
And our health service is going right
much.
down the pan. And you have a big responsibility, the working class people of this country. Excuse me. You're just, don't be getting physical.
I'm not touching you. Can you move back then, please?
You're touching my breast.
Can you move back, please?
So the woman approached Starmer is Audrey White, a Labour member, seemingly furious about Starmer's dishonesty. Now, these are the reactions he's going to get on the ground. Despite the media making out he's some kind of effective, smart politician, in reality, a lot of people are furious. So that video has been viewed on Twitter more than 1.2 million times. Now, client journalist Lee Harpin, one of the more right-wing cheerleaders, has made himself more and more visible in the defence of the Labour right. Now, he thinks he's uncovered a gotcha. He tweeted this. The woman who staged confrontation with Keir Starmer in Liverpool today claimed, "I am still a Labour member. The truth is, Audrey White was suspended over anti-Semitism claims in 2020 and has been expelled from the party." Now, under the tweet, he adds a link to his own report on the right-wing Jewish Chronicle website. Since he's only a client journalist, he doesn't do all that much investigating. Now, it turns out...
And this is the guy who's been... Yeah, oh, go ahead.
The Jewish Chronicle apologised to Audrey White because she was accused of weaponising anti-Semitism, and they lost the libel case and paid all damages and legal costs. So Lee Harpin's own paper lied about it, but he still hasn't deleted the tweet.
Well,
Now,
Lee Harpin was the reporter who lied about it in the first place.
I think that Audrey speaks to a whole lot of people, especially Labour members. But what does it mean for the wider public? Now, people don't like dishonesty. I think the policy reversals don't bode well, especially when most of the public supports nationalisation. Now, there were 4 different communications on the nationalisation of rail from the Labour Party in the same day. First, Keir Starmer ruled it out. Then he said, well, most of it's in public hands, maybe we will. Then Rachel Reeves said it was a no. Then a shadow cabinet frontbencher said it was definite yes. The lack of professionalism in Starmer's Labour Party is actually quite profound. What amazes me so much is that the one service he's kind of soft on, but he wouldn't actually support nationalisation of, is rail, and that's probably because it's been in the Labour manifesto the last 3 or 4 times, I believe. But you'd think, with the biggest cost of living crisis is down to energy prices, that the one thing you would talk about nationalisation on is energy. What an incredibly out of touch man he is. So why has Keir Starmer given up his pledges on nationalisation? Well, the new excuse is that it doesn't fit in the fiscal responsibility pledge. He wants to reject idealism and go down the route of pragmatism. So let's look at rail. Currently, it has a massive lack of investment. The cost is an absolute rip-off, yet bosses are making record profits. So the most pragmatic way, with all of that in one swoop, is to bring it into public hands. You essentially have, potentially, unlimited investment. Greedy CEOs won't be there to drive wages down, and without the profit motive, costs can come down too. What Starmer is advocating isn't pragmatism, it's ideological. Privatisation is literally ideological. Yet obviously, the political right, the current Labour leadership are so desperate to look sensible that they are pursuing really insensible economic policies. Now, his new slogan is growth, 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 mirroring Blair's phrase on education. What an absolutely tone-deaf campaign. We need to be rethinking about the structure of the economy, and capitalism, the system is based on infinite growth on a finite planet. The problem isn't growth, it's the lack of redistribution. Now, he's refusing to say whether he backs a pay rise that matches inflation, which, if it's not a pay rise in match with inflation, that is a real terms pay cut. But his politics isn't about the state intervening to make things more equal. Now, he's talking about wages in the context of growth. Let's work with business, grow the economy in order to give people better wages and more investment. But the rhetoric actually works. He's essentially saying, look at wage growth, or he's looking at wage growth through the lens of business and capital. If it doesn't work for business, well, sorry, buddy, it won't work for you, Mr. Minimum Wage Worker. This is deeply, deeply neoliberal. Large businesses are making huge profits because they are driving down wages. He should be pursuing a strategy of fairness, of rebalancing the economy, especially when the Tories in the last couple of years have essentially lost the debate on austerity. And that's a superb opportunity for the left and for the centre.
Sorry. Again, the really big issue is narrativization, right? By essentially capitulating the right-wing narrative on all of these issues, It gives you no room to then change the narrative when you do want to pursue these policies theoretically in the future, when you do feel like it's fiscally responsible to do so, right? By seeding the narrative so much, it makes it difficult to then turn that narrative around when you feel like that there is actually the opportunity to do these things.
The left, talking about fiscal credibility and talking about how there's no magic money tree, puts us right back into 2015 and allowed austerity to be the zeitgeist.
True. Very true. Go and subscribe. Go, 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 go. I've put the link in chat. Subscribe, go and like his video as well. It's really good. 100%. I'm still sharing my screen. There we go. So yesterday, I got into a little bit of beef on TikTok, right? So there is a right-wing commentator. I think she's only 20 years old. I think she's quite a young political commentator on TikTok. Now she's got a gig being interviewed on fucking Talk TV. If you look back at my video called Darren Grimes and the Grifter Industrial Complex, I've gone through how basically, no matter how fucking minuscule you are, how minor you are, the right-wing media landscape will try and co-opt you into being part of their ecosystem to be able to try and monopolize the discourse, right? So even a random fucking 3K follower Andy on TikTok, she can suddenly get positions to talk about things on Talk TV. Now, I just done a previous video on TikTok about manufactured consent and the way in which that shapes people's assumptions and things like that. And I also did another video previously about Emily Carver and how they have used their platform on GB News to try and sow distrust in the operation of the NHS. And how the reason why they're doing that is because the people who own GB News had just dropped a lot of money on private healthcare provision. So that's a thing that's been done. And so that it's obvious where kind of that, ooh, get you sorted, come on. Ooh, come on. Oh, it's flashing at me. There we go. I'm start that segment again, fucking hell. So I got into a bit of beef on TikTok, right? So there's a commentator on TikTok. I think she's only 20. She's like a young conservative, like a libertarian type. I think she's a Rothbardian, if my memory serves me correctly, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, I responded to her on TikTok because she is, I think she's like a 3K follower Andy. Now, she's been given a position to talk on Talk TV about NHS funding. Now, if you watch my video that I did previously called Darren Grimes and the Grifter Industrial Complex, I went into in great detail how people, the right-wing media apparatus, will take any kind of person who they think they can use to parrot their narrative, their media lines. So they'll bring them into the ecosystem to try and monopolize the discourse, no matter how small they are. Like, she's not exactly a great talker. She's pretty stupid. And she basically just become a propagandist for like a right-wing institution like Talk TV, which is where she was talking on. Now, previously to that, I just done a video about manufactured consent on my TikTok, talking about how when you look at GB News, one of the hedge funds that runs GB News has just been spent a lot of money investing in private healthcare provision. So they have a financial incentive on moving towards a more private model for the NHS, right? So that's why they've been parroting this anti-NHS propaganda about why it should be more private. And then as soon as I did that video about manufacturing consent around the NHS, this fucker comes up on my TikTok feed to essentially parrot the same lies about the NHS that I said people would say in the previous video. So what I'm going to do, I did a reaction video on TikTok, but I'm not gonna leave you Twitch and YouTube people out. You're gonna get yourself the segment as well. Let's watch what she was saying.
NHS backlog.
Yeah, so Rishi's just sort of announced that it's a national emergency.
He's only just noticed.
I mean, I think it's been that way for so long. I think that even before the pandemic, the NHS waiting lists were about over 4.4 million. So
6.5.
Is it now? So now it's up to 6.5.
Well, sorry, that's right. You're probably right. Actually,
Yeah.
it's now over 6.5.
Which is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it really is a bureaucratic black hole that we have in the government, and people are not ready for that conversation. People feel as though that the NHS is sort of a sacred cow, that we clap for it every Thursday. And my view is, it's absolutely no fault of the doctors and nurses that are on the front line. I have every respect for them.
Of course.
And they're really let down by the administration, and people don't want to have this conversation.
I know you're...
Well, they don't have that conversation because it's fucking stupid and because you're fucking lying, right? They say, oh, it's a black hole, we can't just keep giving them money. Well, the issue is that it's being defunded, right? Look at this graph right here. The image let's see that in full, right? I'm cutting that off with my fucking, there we go, with my chat. I'm gonna have to edit so much out of this video. You see here the amount people have been spending on the NHS as a percentage of GDP, right? All the way through this period in that Labour government, we had excellent service. We were rated from the highest care in the world for both medical outcomes and efficiency. And suddenly, look at this point here, 2010, where the Tories get in power, and suddenly they've started declining. They've been continually declining over time. Oh, well, even before the pandemic, yeah, because the Tories cut loads of money from it. There's no NHS black hole because the money's not being put in that should be used to bring the waiting times down. It is being done specifically and ideologically by the Tory party to make sure that it is being underfunded so that they have a working reason to try and privatise it because they work for their mates in the private sector, for the brown envelopes that they get paid out to govern in a way that is beneficial for them, right? That all of their people who donate to their party are all people who would want to see more private provision in the NHS and to see the model changed to make it stop it being, stop things like certain things being covered, making it no longer free at point of use, continue encroaching of the private sector into the NHS. And that is a deliberate political project, right? It is the spending has continually reduced, and it's only because the Tories have been in power. And you can see the difference in the way in which it was marked by global rankings about healthcare systems under Labour. Like, believe me, I don't like Tony Blair. I don't like him at all. I'm not a fucking sycophant for Blairism or anything like that. One of the things they definitely did do when they were in power was use as much funding as they could to make sure the NHS was working well. We had an excellent NHS now, excellent standards of care in this time. It's only since the Tories have been in power, directly since when they've been in power, that we've seen this reduction in funding and this reduction in healthcare outcomes. And now they have engineered this situation. They get people, fuckers like this, propagandists like this, lying propagandists, to come on TV and then use their power as a media apparatus to try and sow distrust in the NHS as an institution, rather than tell the actual truth about the drop in funding as a percentage of GDP. That is their long-term plan. They ideologically do not believe in state ownership. She is a libertarian. She's a fucking anarcho-capitalist, right? She believes that everything should be left up to the market, everything should be left to the private sector, right? And the reason why she's doing it, the reason why she's been able to do it, is because of the political project of the Conservative Party to undermine public trust in the NHS. And their media goons and their propagandists and who get employed by the media are very, very happy to draw into that because they're all rich enough they don't have to care about whether or not it stops being free at the point of use at all. These people are ghouls. These people are fucking ghouls.
You're right, and we've got to have a conversation. 48% of this salary bill goes to non-clinicians.
I was just about to say, oddly enough, the administrative staff make up half the NHS.
It's ridiculous.
Which is incredible. The world's largest employer.
Exactly. A third largest, I think.
Is it third largest now? I think
but
Walmart overtook it.
No, I think it's the Indian Railway and the Chinese National Army or something like that.
Okay.
I think it's that.
All governmental institutions.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Good. It's good that the government employs lots of people. I thought you guys liked there being high employment. I thought making sure that people had good, high-paying jobs was something that you people like. But no, unfortunately, you guys are so fucking brain-mind fucking addled by your love of anarcho-capitalism or whatever fucking meme ideology that you subscribe to. You just think government bad. That is their entire shtick, is that the government do thing equals bad. Socialism is when the government does stuff, but as a political ideology.
So, but the point here is actually, and you're right, I feel desperately sorry for my friends who are clinicians, doctors, nurses, pharmacists and so on, because they're really struggling.
Oh, I feel desperately sad, but we have to give Serco and Virgin Health loads of money to be able to take over the public nature of the health service.
Against what is a terrible system. But you're right, we've got to stop.
Oh, well, right. Is it a fucking posh cunt as well? There's always a fucking posh cunt in it.
Clapping and saying it's brilliant, because it's not.
No, absolutely, and I think
it was brilliant. It used to be brilliant. I wonder why that might be.
It was really, really quite sad. I feel sorry for, again, all of your colleagues that are thinking that way as well. But also, we're letting down patients and we're letting down the taxpayers. We're spending billions and billions and billions. We are throwing money into a black hole. And
we're not throwing money into a black hole. You've underfunded it. The Tories have fucking underfunded it. I literally showed everybody proof about the deliberate drive to underfund the NHS, right? To deliberately underfund it at the detriment of people die. People die when they don't get proper healthcare from the NHS, and it's the Conservative government who's killed them with their deliberate undermining of NHS as a public utility.
It's just not feasible anymore. We've got to have this honest conversation and really accept that the NHS just is not working.
We need to have real choice. That's my biggest issue, because at the end of the day,
if you want to go private, go private. It's there already. If all of you fucking rich motherfuckers want to go and spend money on the private sector of healthcare, go to Bupa. Be my guest. Fuck off. Stop attacking the NHS.
The NHS is a service. We pay for it, right? Clapping for it and saying it's free. It's free at the point of use, but it's not free because 40% of our taxes goes towards it. We are paying for a service of which that is really underperforming right now, and people don't have a real choice. The same.
Not paying enough. We're not paying enough because it's been underfunded.
Doctor it takes me 3 weeks to see is ready tomorrow if I go private, and even that now they're creating.
We can see the deliberate desire here is to create the specific narrative here that there's no one to blame other than the structure of the NHS. Do I believe there are ways that we can change things to make things a little bit more efficient? Maybe cut round the edges to try and save some money in certain places or whatever. Sure, fine. That's a thing that we theoretically could do. Well, does that mean we need to start charging for it, start moving to an insurance model like they have in Singapore, like fucking Reem over here thinks is a good model, for Christ's sake, right? Do we need to do that to smooth out some of the edges around the NHS? Absolutely fucking not. What we need is proper investment as a percentage of GDP rather than deliberately underfunding it. And actually moving away from the private healthcare operators that rip us off by paying shareholder dividends. As I mentioned before, by employing a private sector company to do it, you have to pay for the labour, the operations, and the materials, and then shareholder dividends on top to make their profits, otherwise they wouldn't do it. If you're doing it in-house in the public sector, you only have to pay for the labour, the operations, and the materials to go into it. You are paying extra for a worse service of the private sector because they are under no duress to deliver a good service. They do not have to deliver a good service because they get paid out by the government either way. So they cut round corners as much as they can to be able to maximise profit. It's not a good system. It is bad and it doesn't work.
A backlog because most people are going private.
So there's another big problem, which is that you cannot see a GP.
Yeah.
And I got into a lot of trouble.
So yeah, it's lies, it's propaganda, and it's done specifically along ideological grounds or in league between the Conservative Party, their donors, and the media goons who do their bidding, right? The fucking little lick-spittle bootlickers who want to, maximise the profit margins of some private healthcare shit cunts, rather than properly looking into the ways in which that the deliberate project has been done by the Conservative, the right, not even just the Conservative Party, the whole of the right-wing political media apparatus to try and undermine our National Health Service. They say, we need to have this difficult conversation. No, we really, really don't. We just need to have a government who gives a fucking shit. That's what we need. A government who actually properly funds it. Like, I don't know, the Labour Party, which regardless of whether whether it's Blair or not, or whatever, I fucking hate him, but at least he funded the health service and we got excellent outcomes because of it. It works in China, right? Like, free at point of view services work in plenty of other countries. There's a deliberate reason why it's not working here. It's because the government are deliberately making sure that it does not work. And then people like you, these little lapdog propagandists, spread that message and sow that narrative to try and force that through as well. These people are the enemy. They're the enemy of all that is good and all that is true, because they lie. They lie and they use the power of capital. Again, this is all cultural hegemony at the end of the day, right? This is all the way in which capital tries to replicate capital by changing people's perceptions, by using tactics such as propaganda to do so. And you have to be really wary for it, and you have to know. You have to be a fucking expert in all of these facts, otherwise you get all your information from these cunts, and they lie to you, and you get the wrong picture. Like, I posted this on TikTok, and the comments are full of people going, "No, I don't care about your statistics. The NHS needs to change because it's all wrong and bad, and we need to look at private healthcare, and because it's just fundamentally broken because they've got diversity officers." I'm sorry, you can't they literally show people evidence, and they don't even look at it because of people like this, right? This needs to stop. Simple as that. What time are we on? Up to 6 o'clock. I don't know to go in the Allison Bailey stuff.
Yeah, so
I don't know if I'm going to Allison Bailey stuff. All of the fucking turf shit is deeply depressing. So there's that drag queen story hour thing that popped up as well, and I really don't feel like going into it right now. It's too emotionally taxing, but I've got a few good segments out of this, so I guess I can post them. I'm going for 2 hours now. But yeah, if I want to drop a follow on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, it's all No Justice MTG everywhere. I'm gonna go in and check out my other content. I hope you did enjoy the stream. Who am I going to raid out to? That's the question. Let's raid into Dan Simpson. I do love a bit of Dan.